There are nights when you wake up with your heart racing, not quite knowing why. The silence of early morning becomes deafening, and a question pierces through you like a blade. What am I doing here? It's not just a question about your physical location, but about your very existence. It's in those moments when something inside you screams that everything you've built, everything you've believed, everything you've been, no longer makes sense. This devastating experience isn't a mental illness, though it might feel like one. It's not a temporary crisis that can be solved with a vacation or a change of scenery. It's something much deeper and paradoxically more sacred. It's what mystics across all traditions have called the dark night of the soul, a territory that spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle knew intimately when, at 29, he experienced what he describes as the death of the ego, a transformation so radical it changed his life forever. If you've made it this far, if something within you resonates with these words, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. Because what we're about to share with you isn't just theoretical concepts, but a practical guide for navigating one of the most intense and transformative processes a human being can experience. Imagine for a moment that your entire life has been like an actor in a play. You've performed your role to perfection. The good child, the successful professional, the loyal friend, the committed partner. But one day, in the middle of the performance, something inside you rebels and screams, "Enough, this isn't who I am." It's as if the actor removed their mask mid-performance, exposing a terrifying void underneath. You no longer know who you are without that role, without that identity you've constructed over years. This is the beginning of what we know as the deepest spiritual crisis a human being can experience. It's not a conscious choice, but something that happens to us, like a storm appearing on the horizon without warning. And though at first it may seem like a catastrophe, it's actually the beginning of something extraordinary, the awakening of your true essence. The symptoms of this journey can manifest in very diverse ways, but they all have something in common: the sensation that the ground beneath your feet is crumbling. Emotionally, it's as if you're living in an inner desert. You feel an emptiness you can't fill, a sadness that has no specific cause, but spreads like a shadow over everything you touch. Tears can come without warning, at the most unexpected moments, as if your soul were releasing years of accumulated pain. Activities that once filled you with joy now seem bland, meaningless. That hobby you loved so much, that show you followed religiously, even conversations with loved ones, everything becomes grey, as if color had disappeared from your world. It's not depression in the clinical sense, though it may seem like it. It's something different. It's the soul preparing for a radical transformation. Mentally, the chaos is even more bewildering. Your mind, which once functioned like clockwork, now seems like a maze with no exit. Beliefs that once gave you security now wobble like houses of cards. That faith you professed, that life philosophy you followed, those values you considered immutable, everything becomes questionable. It's as if your mind were a library, and someone had begun removing books from the shelves, leaving empty spaces you don't know how to fill. The identity you've constructed over years fragments like a broken mirror. You no longer know if you're the person you thought you were, if your achievements really belong to you, if your relationships are authentic. It's a confusion that goes beyond normal uncertainty. It's as if you were living in a house of mirrors, where each reflection shows you a different version of yourself. Your body, that faithful companion you've always taken for granted, also becomes strange territory. The fatigue you feel isn't relieved by rest. It's an exhaustion that goes to your bones, as if you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Some nights, sleep becomes elusive, and your mind won't stop turning over questions that have no immediate answers. Other times, you could sleep for days without feeling refreshed. Your body speaks a language you don't fully understand. Headaches that appear for no reason, chest tightness that no medication relieves, a knot in your stomach that seems permanent. It's as if your physical body were processing a transformation that your conscious mind can't yet comprehend. Have you felt identified with any of these experiences? If so, leave us a comment sharing your experience. Knowing you're not alone in this process can be the first step toward healing. But perhaps the most bewildering aspect of all is the spiritual dimension of this crisis. If you once felt a clear connection to something greater than yourself, now that connection seems to have been severed. It's as if the phone line to the divine had stopped working. Prayers that once consoled you now sound empty. Rituals that gave you peace now seem mechanical and lifeless. This disconnection can be especially painful if you've been a person of faith. You wonder if God has abandoned you, if you've done something to deserve this silence. But the reality is much more complex and, paradoxically, more hopeful than it seems. It's not that the divine has abandoned you, it's that your way of connecting with it is changing radically. However, in the midst of this apparent chaos, strange signs begin to emerge. Synchronicities that seem too perfect to be coincidence. Unexpected encounters with people who tell you exactly what you need to hear. Books that come into your hands at precisely the right moment. Dreams that seem more real than reality itself. It's as if the universe were whispering to you that, though you can't see it clearly, there's a larger plan unfolding. The existential crisis that accompanies this experience is perhaps the deepest a human being can experience. The questions that arise aren't superficial. They go to the heart of existence itself. Who am I really beyond my roles and labels? What is my purpose in this world? Why am I here? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're desperate cries from a soul seeking its deepest truth. It's at this point, roughly midway through this journey, that the true purpose of all this suffering begins to reveal itself. What at first seemed like senseless destruction begins to show its real nature. It's a sacred deconstruction. Your soul is dismantling everything that isn't essential to make space for what you really are. Eckhart Tolle describes this process as the death of the ego, but not in the sense of annihilation, rather transformation. The ego, that part of us that identifies with roles, possessions, achievements, and personal narratives, must die so that our true essence can emerge. It's like a snake that must shed its old skin in order to grow. This symbolic death isn't an ending, but a birth. It's the beginning of a process that medieval alchemists called the Great Work, the transformation of the lead of our conditioned personality into the gold of our true nature. But for this to happen, we must first traverse what they called the nigredo, the black phase of decomposition and chaos. Fear of the unknown becomes your constant companion during this phase. It's natural. You're letting go of everything that gave you security without guarantees of what will come next. It's like jumping off a cliff, hoping wings will grow during the fall. But this fear, though uncomfortable, is also a sign that you're on the right path. Only those willing to grow feel afraid. Detachment becomes a vital necessity. People you once considered essential in your life may drift away or reveal aspects you hadn't seen before. Beliefs that had been your pillars crumble like sandcastles. Behavioral patterns that had defined your personality become obsolete. It's a painful but necessary process. It's like pruning a tree. It seems destructive, but it allows for healthier and more abundant growth. As you navigate this inner storm, qualities you perhaps didn't know you possessed begin to emerge. Real humility, not the false modesty we sometimes adopt socially, but genuine humility born from recognizing that there are forces greater than your ego operating in your life. This humility doesn't make you feel small. It makes you feel part of something infinitely larger. Surrender becomes a daily practice. Not the surrender of passive resignation, but the active surrender of one who understands that fighting the river only generates more suffering. It's like learning to swim. At first you fight against the water, but when you relax and work with it, you discover it can support you. If you've made it to this point in our conversation, it's because something within you recognizes this truth. I invite you not only to subscribe to our channel, but also to share your experience in the comments. Your story could be the lighthouse that guides other navigators on this same journey. One of the most beautiful consequences of this crisis is the development of genuine compassion, not only toward others, but toward yourself. When you've traversed your own inner hell, when you've hit rock bottom and survived, you develop a profound understanding of human suffering. You no longer judge others for their struggles, because you know that each person is fighting battles that aren't visible from the outside. This compassion extends like ripples in a pond. It begins with yourself, with that part of you that has been suffering, and expands toward all the people you encounter on your path. It's as if your heart had been broken and in healing had healed larger and more capable of love. The spiritual rebirth that emerges from this crisis isn't a return to who you were before, but the birth of who you've always been destined to be. It's as if you were a sculpture that had been hidden within a block of marble, and this crisis had been the chisel that removed everything that wasn't you. Your relationship with the divine, with life, with other human beings becomes more authentic. You no longer need intermediaries to connect with the sacred. You've discovered that the sacred lives within you. You no longer seek happiness in external things. You've found a source of peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. But let's talk about something very practical. How do you consciously navigate this journey when you're in the middle of the hurricane? Because it's one thing to intellectually understand what's happening, and quite another to maintain your sanity when you feel everything crumbling beneath your feet. The first step is radical acceptance, not passive resignation, but active acceptance that this is what's happening now. It's like when you're in the middle of a storm at sea. You can spend all your energy fighting the waves, or you can learn to navigate with them. Resistance only amplifies suffering. Accept that it's normal to feel lost. Accept that it's natural to question everything you thought you knew about yourself and about life. Accept that the emptiness you feel isn't evidence that something's wrong with you, but evidence that something extraordinary is trying to be born through you. The loneliness you experience during this process can be especially intense. You feel misunderstood by the people closest to you. Your friends may try to cheer you up with well-intentioned but superficial advice. You need to get out more. You should keep your mind busy. Think positive. But you know this goes far beyond what a change in attitude can resolve. This loneliness, as painful as it may be, is also sacred. It's in solitude where the deepest transformations are gestated. It's like being in a butterfly's cocoon. You need that protected space, that temporary isolation, so the metamorphosis can occur. During this process, your relationship with time also transforms. Days can seem endless, loaded with a heaviness that makes each hour feel like an eternity. Or conversely, you may feel time slipping through your fingers without being able to grasp anything solid. This temporal distortion is completely normal. Your psyche is processing changes so profound that your habitual perception of reality is altered. It's important to understand that the dark night of the soul isn't linear. It's not a process that follows an orderly progression from point A to point B. It's more like a spiral. You may feel you're advancing, and suddenly it seems you've gone backward. You may have days of clarity followed by weeks of confusion. This doesn't mean you're getting worse. It means you're processing increasingly deeper layers of your being. Dreams during this period often become particularly intense and symbolic. It's as if your unconscious were working overtime to process all the transformation taking place. You may dream of symbolic deaths, of mazes with no exit, of figures representing unknown aspects of yourself. Pay attention to these dreams. They often contain important clues about what's emerging within you. Creativity can be affected in contradictory ways. Some people experience a creative explosion, as if the inner chaos needed to find a form of expression. Others, conversely, may feel their creative source has dried up completely. Both experiences are valid and temporary. The creativity that emerges after this process often has a depth and authenticity it didn't possess before. Your body can become a map of unprocessed emotions. That chest pain that no medication relieves may be your heart processing deep losses. That shoulder tension may be the weight of expectations you no longer wish to carry. Those digestive discomforts may be your body rejecting situations or relationships that no longer nourish you. Listen to your body with compassion. Not all physical symptoms require immediate medical intervention, though of course it's important to rule out physical causes when necessary. Often, the body is simply expressing what the mind can't fully process. It's crucial during this process not to make drastic decisions impulsively. The temptation to change everything at once can be very strong. Quit your job, end relationships, move to another country. Though these changes may be necessary eventually, it's important not to act from desperation but from the clarity that will eventually emerge. However, it is important to honor the internal changes that are occurring. If certain activities no longer resonate with you, it's okay to let them go gradually. If some relationships feel forced or superficial, it's okay to create space. The art lies in discerning between changes that are expressions of your true growth and those that are reactions of fear or desperation. Spirituality during this period can become completely different from what it was before. If you were religious, you may find yourself questioning dogmas you once accepted without question. If you were atheist, you may begin to feel an inexplicable thirst for the transcendent. If you practiced meditation, you may now find it impossible to quiet your mind, or conversely, you may feel a compulsive need to meditate. There's no right way to live spiritually during the dark night of the soul. What matters is maintaining honesty with yourself. If prayer no longer comforts you, it's okay to explore other forms of connection. If rituals feel empty, it's okay to create new ones or simply exist in silence. As you advance in this process, you'll begin to notice subtle but profound changes. Situations that once deeply disturbed you now affect you less. People who once had power over your emotions now seem to have lost that influence. It's not that you've become insensitive, it's that you found an inner center that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Your perception of beauty also transforms. You may find moving depth in things you once overlooked, the way light filters through leaves, the expression on a stranger's face, the silence between notes in a song. It's as if your senses had been refined, as if you were capable of perceiving dimensions of reality that were previously hidden. Human relationships acquire a new dimension. You no longer seek in others what you can only find within yourself. You no longer need constant validation, nor do you feel the compulsion to validate others to maintain their approval. The connections that arise from this new place are more authentic, though they may be fewer in number. Some people from your past life may naturally drift away, not through conflict, but through simple vibrational incompatibility. And that's okay. Not everyone is destined to accompany you through all stages of your evolution. It's like shedding skin. Some things simply no longer fit. Forgiveness becomes a natural process, not forced. You forgive not because it's morally correct, but because holding resentment feels like carrying unnecessary stones. You forgive others not to excuse their behavior, but to free your own energy. And crucially, you learn to forgive yourself for all the years you spent living from fear instead of love. Death no longer terrifies you in the same way. Not because you've developed a morbid fascination, but because you've experienced so many symbolic deaths that you understand death is simply another form of transformation. You've died to the ego and been reborn. You've died to old identities and found new ways of being. Physical death becomes less terrifying when you've experienced the immortality of essence. Your relationship with money and material possessions transforms profoundly. It's not that you become irresponsible or dismissive toward practical aspects of life, but these cease to be the measure of your worth as a person. Success is redefined. It's no longer accumulating more, but being more authentic. Abundance is redefined. It's no longer having more, but needing less. The dark night of the soul is, in essence, a process of personal alchemy. It's the transformation of the lead of unconsciousness into the gold of wisdom. It's a process that can't be rushed, can't be avoided once it has begun, and can't be completed by anyone other than yourself. But here's the beautiful paradox. Though it's a deeply personal process, you're not alone in it. You're connected to an invisible network of souls who have gone through or are going through the same transformation. Every time someone consciously traverses their dark night, they facilitate the path for others. It's as if you were tracing a trail in a forest that others could follow. If you're living this experience now, I want you to know that what you feel is valid. Your pain is real, but so is your strength. Your confusion is understandable, but so is your emerging wisdom. You're exactly where you need to be, living exactly what you need to live to become who you're destined to be. There's no stopwatch for this journey. For some, it may last months. For others, years. But what is certain is that when you emerge from the other side, you understand that every moment of suffering had a purpose. Every tear shed was necessary to wash old wounds. Every sleepless night was a sacred vigil. Every unanswered question was an invitation to delve deeper into the mystery of existence. The person who emerges from the dark night of the soul is fundamentally different from the one who entered. It's not that you've become someone completely new, but that you've remembered who you've always been beneath all the layers of social, family, and cultural conditioning. This new version of you is quieter but more powerful, speaks less but says more, needs less but offers more, is more vulnerable but also stronger, has learned that true strength doesn't come from building walls, but from having the courage to keep your heart open even after being wounded. The dark night of the soul isn't punishment. It's a gift. It's life's way of telling us, you're capable of much more than you think. You're stronger, wiser, more loving than you've imagined. But to discover it, you must first let go of who you think you are. And when you finally emerge from this journey, when you look back at the path traveled, you feel profound gratitude. Not gratitude for the suffering itself, but gratitude for the transformation that suffering made possible. It's like feeling grateful for the storm that cleared the air and allowed the sun to emerge with a clarity you hadn't seen before. If this content has resonated with you, if you've found comfort or understanding in these words, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any content that might accompany you in your awakening process. Share this message with someone who might need it. Leave a like if it's been useful to you, and tell us in the comments about your own experience with this journey. Remember that every shared story is a light that can guide others in the darkness. The dark night of the soul isn't the end of your spiritual path. It's when it truly begins. It's when you stop being a spiritual tourist and become a true pilgrim. It's when you stop looking for answers outside and begin to find them in the place where they've always been, within you. It's when you stop living others' lives and begin to live your own life, authentic and deeply yours.